Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth in the series of Bite-Sized Training for All as part of the celebration of 50 years of the Protection of Wrecks Act. I'm Peter Knott, Education Manager of the Nautical Archaeology Society. Today's webinar is Writing Project Proposals and Applying for Funding. The presenter today will be Alison James from MSDS Marine and Heritage.
So hello everyone. Before we start, I thought it might be useful to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me and to hopefully illustrate what makes me the person who's sat here talking to you about this subject. My name is Alison James. I work for MSDS Marine. We're a specialist marine and coastal contractor based in Derbyshire in the UK. I'm a director at MSDS and I'm responsible for developing a lot of our project proposals and applying for the funding to make them happen. But before that, I spent 10 years at Historic England, where part of my role included looking at project proposals to help assist in allocating funding through their grant programme. This gave me the opportunity to read an awful lot of proposals in that time, and I'd like to think I'm well placed to know what does and what doesn't work. I've also worked for a number of UK marine archaeological charities, and I'm currently a trustee of the Nautical Archaeology Society. I'm a former committee member of the Protected Wreck Association. I'm also a diver and I'm one of the owners of Go Dive, so I'd like to think I know a little bit about UK diving and working with the recreational diving community. In recent years, I've successfully helped develop major excavation projects, develop the Historic England Dive Trail Scheme, and help secure funding for MSDS, the NAS, and others from larger organisations, including Historic England and the National Lottery Heritage Fund, as well as securing lots of smaller pots of funding from numerous trusts and charities. This evening is intended to be a bite-sized snippet of training aimed at giving you some useful tools and knowledge to start developing your own project proposals and to help you with applying for funding to make some projects actually happen. Because it's bite-sized, there won't be time to go into every fund that's out there, but hopefully I'll give you a few ideas to get you started. With this year marking the 50th anniversary of the Protection of Wrecks Act, it seems like a really good opportunity to help people understand a little bit more about applying for funding to help support your future funding applications on protected wreck sites. Some topics may be familiar to some of you, but hopefully there'll be something both new and of use to everyone watching. So tonight I'm going to cover what do we mean by a project proposal, the structure of project proposals, what funding is there available? How do we find out about funding? Who do we ask for help and advice? I'm incredibly conscious, though, that this has the potential to not be the most exciting talk I've ever given, but I'm also hopeful that despite this, you'll find it useful and it could help generate some excellent projects in future. To try and keep you awake, I've tried to slot in lots of nice pictures from recent projects we've been undertaking. Ultimately, though, it's a starting point, and I am more than happy to help provide advice and to even comment on your applications you want to write in future. So please do take me up on that. So what do I actually mean when I say project proposal? Well, the specifics will vary from project to project and from funder to funder. However, all project proposals are the starting point of what you want to do, and they're incredibly helpful to really set out how you'll do it. I'm going to mention a Historic England document called MORPH quite a lot this evening. MORPH stands for Management of Research Projects in the Historic Environment, and it's a really incredibly useful document for anybody wanting to undertake a research project in the historic environment, including those on wreck sites. MORPH is aimed at projects with a focus on any historic environment research, and that might take place in a variety of contexts, including projects that are part of a personal project, such as postgraduate studies, or as part of a volunteer or dive group-led activity. I've put a series of QR codes throughout this presentation, and you can scan these to go to the documents or websites that I mentioned. And the first one on this slide will take you through to MORPH. It really is an incredibly useful document intended for both people doing work in the historic environment as well as the people commissioning it. So it allows you to ensure that any proposal that you put together is using the same language as the people who might actually be able to fund it or commission it. And that really is incredibly helpful and will add strength to any proposal that you do make. A project proposal is the first step to making a project happen. And as it says here on the screen, it's the first document you will produce once you identify the need for the project to happen in the first place. Ideally, you really want to spend as little time on it as possible in some ways, as there's no guarantee your funding application will be successful. But having said that, it can be your one shot at making something happen. So it really is important that you get it right. It needs to provide an outline with enough detail to allow others to understand what you want to do and why you think it needs to be done. So, what should you actually include in your project proposal? Well, this will really vary depending on the context and who you're applying for funding from. And I'll come on to that a bit more later. But for now, I'm going to focus on how proposals are set out in Morph. The first thing is to set up your document with a document control grid on the first page. As slides go, this one probably looks quite overwhelming. It's probably a bit intimidating, but honestly, it's incredibly useful. And so it's important to have a quick look at it and understand it. It will help both you and the people you're working with and funders and other people you consult to keep track of the document and where you are in its life cycle. So the table you can see here gives details of the document that you're going to be working on, and it allows you to keep track of changes to it as you go through developing the proposal and the wider project. Most of the fields are really self-explanatory, and indeed the table you see here is included in Appendix 2 of that Morph document. And I'm just going to run through the field quickly because I think it will be helpful. So title is fairly obvious. It's the official title of the document. You then list the name of the author or authors, and it can be really helpful here if you pop down contact details for them too, in case funders or sort of stakeholders want to get in touch with you in future. Derivation is where you explain links to previous documents or how you got to this point. For example, it could have been that you had a discussion with a heritage organisation and they suggested that you put together this proposal. So if so, say that here. The origination date is when the first version of the document was created. And I should highlight here that this shouldn't be changed on later versions of the document. The revisers are everyone involved in creating the document by supplying text or through commenting. The date of last revision is simply that, the date the document was last changed in any way. Version is the version number for the document, and the status is the status of the document. So, for example, are you at draft? Is it a document for consultation, or is it a final agreed document? Say that there. In summary of changes, you need to list major changes in the version compared with previous versions, especially items that need attention from reviewers. In the circulation, you can list who this version of the document has been circulated to. Let's be transparent and clear about who it's going to. And then use the required action to tell people what you want them to do with it. For example, do you need them to comment by a certain date? Be clear, pop it there. The file name and location is where the document is saved on your computer or server. It might seem a simple thing, but it could save you or somebody else a lot of time later on by listing that information. The final suggested document control field is approval, and you can provide space for a signature on the final approved version and use not required for earlier drafts if you want. But as with anything, this document control grid is only a suggestion or a starting point. You might find some bits aren't relevant to you or your needs, or that you need to add others, and that's okay. It is a starting point. So that's the document control grid. But what do you actually need to include in your project proposal? Well, I was thinking about this, and you think of your project proposal a bit like a dive briefing. It should be clear and it should explain the objectives of the dive, but be concise. You don't want to overload people. The first thing is, what are you going to call your project? You might want to give it a snazzy name or use acronyms that make people remember it, but I really would advise caution a little bit. Don't get too clever and make sure it says something about what you're actually going to do. The next thing is background. You need to describe the context for the background and explain why you need to do it at this time. So refer to previous work that's taken place, if any has taken place. And if you're planning on working on a wreck with a known location, perhaps include a map here showing where the wreck is. It's a really good place to include detail. Don't presume people know what you're talking about and what your project's about. Next is the research aims and objectives. And here are some aims of a project proposal we recently gained funding for from Historic England. The aims state what we wanted to do, and the objectives say how we will achieve them. Essentially, you need to ask yourself the question of what the project will aim to achieve and try and answer that here. Setting this down as questions may be helpful, and that's one way of doing it. And you should also think about what the potential of the project is to answer these questions as you go. So sort of start to think about those sorts of things in your aims and objectives. The next area is perhaps one of the most important, especially if your project proposal is to underpin a funding application, and that's going to be the business case. You very clearly need to set out why the project needs to happen now with the proposed team that you're suggesting and in the way that you propose. So here are some examples of the sorts of things we include in our business case sections. This is a recent submission that was successful to Historic England. So things like referring to their corporate plan and their research agendas, as well as local frameworks and strategies relevant to the project. And if you're not sure of those, talk to people, reach out to people like the NAS, like us, like the Protected Rec Association, and they might be able to give you some tips and some guidance on things you could include here. You can also see here how within the document we refer to specific parts of each of them and really expanded on how our project would help deliver them. You need to make sure you show how your project can address organisational strategies and add public value. And I'll come on to public value more when I talk specifically about applying for funding. The method statement is where you outline how the aims and objectives will be achieved. So what techniques or approaches are you going to use? And at this stage, it's only a proposal, so you don't need to be too prescriptive, but detail is key. And it's really important to be clear on how you intend to carry out your project. So if you're trying to pull together a proposal for a diving project, how are you going to undertake that diving? Is it going to be done by volunteers, or are your divers at work and under HSE diving regulations? How will you share the results of your project with the wider world? You may plan to publish a report, you might want to host content online or create a video, but explain that here. Don't presume people will know that you want to plan to do something. Really do set it out clearly, step by step, with a clear sort of task list that says how you'll do the method statement. Next is the project scope. So you need to be clear here about what your project includes, and perhaps just as importantly, what it doesn't include. What is needed here will be really different from project to project, but it could be that you clearly identify your project will cover a very specific geographical area or even a time period. For example, in a recent project we undertook on the London Protected Rec with the licensee Stephen Ellis, the project scope simply stated that the scope of the project was only to focus on the designated area of the rec and not areas outside of the designation. So it can be as simple as that, but you do need to be clear so that nobody's surprised later on if you have done something, or indeed if you haven't done something. Next is interfaces. That might seem a bit like corporate speak, but it really, really isn't. You simply need to consider what links or connections there are to other projects and if any links need to be made. You can see here how for a project we're undertaking currently with the Southwest Maritime Archaeology Group on the Salcombe Cannon Protected Wreck site, we've explained how our project supports previous research that's taken place and indeed builds on previous projects that have taken place. Next is your proposed project team. So add detail on who your team are going to be and information on their roles within the team. Really make it clear why they are the best people to undertake the work. Don't presume that people who are reading your document will know who they are and the experience they've had. Really set it out clearly. And in here, you may want to include an estimate of your overall budget that's needed to bring the team and the project together, including the equipment and travel they'll need as well. And each funding body will have really clear guidance on how they want to see this. So have a look at that before you start putting it together. Because if a funding body has set out that they want to see costs or budgets given in one way, make sure you do it how they ask. It might not seem the easiest way or the most simple way to you, but there will be a reason. So see what the guidance is before you start. Finally, you'll need to give an estimate of how long the project will take to complete. And the idea of the project proposal is it can bring all parties together, from the team wanting to do the work through to other stakeholders and potential funders, and it provides the building blocks to start the project. And that leads us nicely onto the idea of actually applying for funding. So funding for archaeology, including that for underwater, sometimes feels like an ever diminishing resource that we have to fight for, but there is funding out there if you look hard enough. The heritage agencies and the National Lottery Heritage Fund might be the most obvious places to start, but there are other funding sources out there too. Perhaps the most obvious diving fund is the BZAC Jubilee Trust, so that's the official charity of BZAC. The Jubilee Trust supports BZAC members and clubs by providing financial support to divers for a wide variety of scuba projects, including expeditions. When a project falls beyond the scope and financial resources of a club, or indeed a group of divers, they can apply for funding through the Jubilee Trust grant scheme. The Jubilee Trust, I should say, also recognises outstanding projects and contributions to diving by giving out several prestigious awards to BZAC clubs and members each year. Then we've got the Paddy Project Aware Foundation, which encourages and supports research and education related to aquatic environments. But I think I should say the focus here is very much on marine wildlife and ecosystems rather than cultural heritage. Many trusts and societies maintain small funding streams, and annual grants are available from organisations such as the Honor Frost Foundation, us at MSDS Marine, and through the Regional Council for British Archaeology groups. I'm not going to go into any more detail during this presentation on the Honor Frost Foundation, as they primarily support regional research into maritime archaeology undertaken in the countries where Honor Frost worked. So broadly, that's the Eastern Mediterranean, specifically Cyprus, Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt, including the Red Sea. And that's outside of our area of interest in this presentation. But their small grants are offered twice a year for amounts up to £10,000. So if your work is in the Eastern Mediterranean, then I strongly suggest you have a look. Sometimes for funny, you just have to know where to look though. And I've included a QR code link here to a fantastic page on the British Archaeological Jobs Resource website. It's most commonly called Badger, and it's well worth a look. The list is a superbly pulled together list of all the grants, funding opportunities, and financial help there is for archaeology in the UK. And you can search it in many different ways, sort of both thematically and regionally, and for sort of what you want to do. So it's well worth a look. There are other funding streams out there too, though. So in early 2022, I was able to find two new charitable organisations I'd never heard of previously. So the Aurelius Trust and the Headley Trust to set up a pilot scheme to help fund the conservation of artefacts that were being exposed on the seabed at protected wreck sites. Those finds are recovered by volunteers because they're at risk of being lost forever. And we managed to achieve funding through these two new organisations. Well, they weren't new, I just hadn't heard of them, to actually put a pilot scheme in place. And sometimes Google is really your friend here. So spending 30 minutes searching for funding can reveal wonderful results like this. That's how I found those two organisations. We recently undertook a project working with Leicester YMCA, working with homeless young people to teach them diving and get them into work. And again, that was a funding stream that I only found for a spot of Googling. So embrace Google, it is your friend in this case. There are many other online funding directories too. Some are hidden behind paywalls, but other like the Get Grants Funding Finder are free resources for grant fundraisers with information on how to apply, including what the funders will fund and any further information you may need. Again, there's a QR code here which will take you to that Get Grants Funding Finder. Depending on where you're working in the UK will really depend which heritage agency you need to approach. For example, if you're working in Wales, the heritage agency will be Cadw, and in Scotland, Historic Environment Scotland. I'm going to focus on Historic England though tonight, as they're the heritage agency in England, as this is where most of my personal experience lies. So Historic England have a number of grant schemes available, but the most appropriate for today's audience is most likely to be the Heritage Protection Commissions programme. It is, however, worth keeping an eye on social media and checking the Historic England website, as occasionally they have one-off grant schemes that appear, such as the recent Everyday Heritage grants that might provide more opportunities to fund your projects. There are three ways to apply for funding from Historic England. So there's the Open Proposals programme, and that means simply that you can submit applications to them at any time throughout the year. Sometimes they also issue calls for proposals, like they did in the case of the sort of celebrations and commemorations around the 50th anniversary of the Protection of Wrecks Act, where the subject for grant aid is specifically defined, like it was in this case with 50 years of protected wrecks, but where your own creativity and experience and expertise shape your application. And new calls are added throughout the year, so check the Historic England website regularly for them. Finally, Historic England also advertise tender opportunities with very specific project requirements, and they're probably outside this evening's audience. You may be interested in them, so you can have a look for those on the HE website. For open proposals, though, and calls for proposals, there's a two-stage application process. The first stage is submitting a short project proposal to the Heritage Protection Commissions team, just like the one we've already discussed this evening. And I'd strongly suggest talking to Terry or Heffin in the Historic England Marine team first and chatting through your idea with them. They're incredibly approachable and they'll be able to advise you on tailoring your application to ensure success. It's really good advice, though, that for whoever you approach for funding, Most funders really will welcome an informal discussion before you actually apply. It can save both you and them time in the long run. As if a project's not suitable, they can tell you that before you actually put pen to paper, or they could suggest a few tweaks to make it fit their priorities. So talk to people it is key. All proposals to Historic England are assessed for the methods proposed, the expertise and the experience of the proposed project team, the amount of grants that you need, and the impact the project will have on its intended users. They aim to tell you a decision within 2 months of receiving the proposal. And if successful, you may be asked to either provide further clarification in a revised project proposal, or you may be invited to develop a much more detailed project design. But if that's the case, Historic England will fund the time it takes you to write that project design document, which is well worth knowing. There is a lot of helpful information in the guidance for grant projects supporting information. And again, there's a QR code on the screen. Historic England assess all the projects they fund on how they will achieve outcomes that deliver public value. And I've mentioned that already tonight. So let's have a quick look at what is meant by that now. Historic England, like many other funders, have adopted a public value framework to provide assurance to its stakeholders, including the tax-paying public, that it invests money in ways that optimise value. And the Historic England Public Value Framework is based on a 2017 report called Delivering Better Outcomes for Citizens, Practical Steps for Unlocking Public Value, if anyone is interested. The public value framework underpins all 6 strategic objectives of the Historic England corporate plan. And I've put a QR code link up here, which will take you to the Historic England page that sets out how they assess all that, how they assess all that they do against how it will achieve outcomes that deliver public value. And it's well worth a quick read of this before you think about applying. It may seem a bit daunting, but having at least an outline understanding of it will stand your applications in good stead, and leaving it out can be counterproductive. You do not have to understand it all. I think it's important to say that, but at least being aware of it and how you can fit in and support that public value is important. And I believe Historic England will be bringing out more guidance of this in future. So it's a case of watch this space for now. Moving on then to other funders and the National Lottery Heritage Fund, previously known as the Heritage Lottery Fund or HLF, and you may have heard it's referred to in the past in that way. The Heritage Fund projects of all sizes that connect people and communities to the UK's heritage. Using money raised by the National Lottery, the National Lottery Heritage Fund inspires, it leads and it resources UK's heritage to create positive and lasting change for people and communities now and for the future. So since 1994, they've invested a staggering 9.9 billion into heritage and supported well over 51,000 projects, which is outstanding, really. They don't define heritage, but rather they ask applicants to tell them why you think it's important and why you think it should be preserved. From historic buildings, industrial legacy, the natural environment to collections, traditions, stories, and more. Heritage can be anything from the past that you value and you want to pass on for future generations. And that's a really brilliant definition for when we're thinking about work on protected wreck sites or other maritime archaeology areas. Funding can be spent on activities, it can be spent on repairs and conservation, digital outputs, new staff posts, paid training placements, and professional fees. But what it can't be done is spent on existing staff posts or on organisational costs, or, and this is important, cost for activities that have taken place before the grant is awarded. And that's worth highlighting because a lot of funders will not fund things retrospectively. So if you've got a new idea, don't go off and do it and then try and get the funding. At the very sort of moment you have that idea, start to think about funding. So the Heritage Fund currently offer funding at 3 levels. So you can see them there, £3,000 to £10,000, £10,000 to £250,000, and £250,000 to £10 million. So for the middle grants, the £10,000 to £250,000 ones, you could use that optional project inquiry form to get feedback within 10 working days. And I really would suggest you do that. As with when we were talking about Historic England, having that conversation up front can save you a lot of time and effort in the long run. For the larger grants, you must submit an expression of interest application before starting a full application. And they say you should receive feedback on that within 20 working days. For the smaller grants, there's no way to get feedback prior to applying, so that's worth saying. However, the National Lottery Heritage Fund do hold workshops, they do hold sessions, they do hold webinars, so look out for those if you are thinking of applying. For today's audience, though, I'm going to focus on the £3,000 to £10,000 grants. The programme is open to not-for-profit organisations and private owners of heritage. Some examples of who they can fund include charities, trusts, community and voluntary groups, and community interest companies. They will ask to see your constitution or governing document, and you must have at least 2 people on your board or management committee who are not related by blood or marriage and are not living at the same address. So to support the sector in its continued recovery from COVID and through the cost of living crisis, they're currently funding and prioritising heritage projects that promote inclusion and involve a wide range of people, that boost the local economy, that encourage skills development and job creation, that support well-being, that create better places to live, work and visit, that improve the resilience of organisations working in heritage. And what they are saying is that projects must achieve at least one inclusion outcome, so one of these outcomes. In addition to all of these outcomes, all projects must also consider long-term environmental sustainability. There are no deadlines, so you can apply whenever you're ready, and decisions will be made within 8 weeks. They're fairly simple applications as an application process goes, but I'm always here if anybody wants help and advice with them. As already highlighted, there's loads of funders out there. Some might have a regional or thematic focus, but there are 2 I'm going to flag in more detail tonight. The BZAC Jubilee Trust, who I've already mentioned, are a good place to look to for funding. And if you look at past projects on their website, you'll see that there's many related to wreck diving. The aim of the Jubilee Trust grants is to raise the standard of projects undertaken by diving clubs, individuals, or by expeditions by providing financial assistance to them. So as long as the aims and execution of the project don't conflict with the objectives of the trust. So it's a simple thing. Go on there and just check what you're doing is in line with what BZAC want to see. They want to encourage both the ordinary diver with no previous project or scientific experience, as well as more experienced organisations and scientists. Naturally, an application from an amateur will not be assessed in direct competition with that from a professional. Both are considered on their own individual merits, and I think it's important to flag that. The amount of the grant award will be at the discretion of the Jubilee Trust, but it will seldom cover the whole cost of a project. Grant awards are made to individuals, notwithstanding the fact that the individual might participate in a larger group enterprise. You can apply at any time, but the trust meets 3 times a year to consider applications. So the cut-off dates for applying for those meetings are the 1st of December, the 1st of April, and the 1st of August. An application is via an application form that's on their website. It's worth saying funds are limited and only a proportion of applicants are successful. The grant you get will depend on the nature of your proposal, how much cash you intend to raise yourself, and the competence with which you've planned the project. They don't fund a project completely. It's worth saying that too. And recently, grants have ranged from a few £100s up to several thousands. So there's quite a wide range of grant funding there. Successful candidates must then provide a report on their activities, including a financial statement, no later than the 1st anniversary of the awarding of the grant. Then moving on, we have the MSDS Marine grants. Now, I obviously work for MSDS Marine, but this isn't a sales pitch. I'm merely highlighting them as they are relevant and enable you to find out more. Protected REC grant awards are designed to assist with specific costs incurred by volunteers working on sites protected under the Protection of Wrecks Act 1973, as well as other UK heritage legislation. So do you need new equipment? Is there training you'd benefit from? Then we're happy to consider anything that would help you. All team members are eligible to apply for the award, providing that you've got the support of a principal licensee for the site. And on completion of work, the successful candidates must submit a 500-word blog and at least 3 images for publication on the MSDS website, detailing what the award has been used for. There's a very short application form for this. It really is simply a side of A4, and it's normally made live each September, with applications closing towards the end of October. Submissions are judged by us at MSDS in consultation with the heritage agencies. I should also add we do a second award aimed at supporting students. So if that's more appropriate, have a look at that one. This year, as I've already said, it's a special year. It's the 50th anniversary of the Protection of Wrecks Act. And to help celebrate that, we might do something a bit different with our grants this year, but we haven't fully decided and we haven't announced anything yet. So watch this space. There isn't time tonight to go into every single grant that's out there this evening, because there's hundreds, if I'm honest, but there are some really useful things to remember. Funders want you to align to their priorities. They're not there to pay for you to have fun diving. You may have fun while you're diving, but that's a secondary benefit of the funding that will be available. It's well worth the time to read through their websites and establish any current priorities they have, and to understand more about their organisation and their priorities before you actually apply. Remember to think about public value. Just because you think a project is important doesn't mean that it offers good public value. However, by thinking it through in those terms, sometimes you can make simple tweaks that do ensure it offers excellent public value to funders. Every funder will rather helpfully have a different application process. So it's not a case of one size fits all. You might have to rewrite a project proposal in multiple different ways to allow you to approach a number of organizations. That might seem mind boggling and frustrating at times, but within each funding organization, there are individuals whose role it is to help. So make contact with them and chat to them if they get stuck. I have honestly found that people working in heritage organizations, especially funders, are some of the most helpful and approachable people there are. So pick up the phone to them, email them, and make the most of their expert knowledge and support. Treat them as your friends. They're not your enemies. They're there to help. And it's a partnership applying for funding, both with the person who gets the funding and the funding organisation. Finally, to find out about different funding streams, Google is your friend. I've said that already tonight, but it's true. But it also pays to stay connected. So make sure you read things like the NAS Discoveries email that goes out to members each week. Sign up to the Historic England Marine and Coastal newsletter and join the Protected Wreck Association. After all, it's free. It's networks such as these that will share details of new funds as they emerge. There's also a Marine Special Interest Group as part of the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists. You don't need to be a member of CIFA to join, but again, it may be useful for some of you. So look out for these networks and stay connected to the people in them. So that's it for this webinar. We've come to the end of this piece of bite-sized training. I really do hope you found it's a useful starting point and that you're now ready to go and get started on lots of lovely project proposals and funding applications. So in this training, we've looked at what do we mean by a project proposal? The structure of project proposals. So how do we write them? How should they look? We've had a brief look at what funding is available, and we've had a look at how we find out about funding, as well as considering who to ask for help and advice in the funding bodies themselves. So thank you very much for listening. I do hope it's been helpful. I've popped my email address on the screen here. Please, and it's a genuine offer, do feel free to contact me for any further help and advice. I'm always happy to read a draft proposal. Depending on the time of year and what fieldwork's going on, it might take me longer sometimes than others, but I will provide feedback to you or do anything else that might help you get a project off the ground. From a community-focused outreach project to a diving project, I'd love to see more of them happening. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Alison, for your interesting and useful presentation today. And thank you to Historic England for ensuring that these bite-sized webinars are free for everyone to attend and watch online whenever they like. If you are interested in marine licensing and the Merchant Shipping Act, please check out our next bite-sized training video.